Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
This week is our Roundtable with Legally Speaking with Steve. August is National Wellness Month. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Productions. And we have our partner on the line with us today, and that is a familiar voice you've heard many times on our show. That's Mr. Stephen J. Seidman. He's a founding attorney of Seidman Law Office with over 30 years as an experienced trial lawyer focused on personal injury. Steve is America's Heroes Group partner, sponsor, and advisory board member. We're going to catch up on some things he wants to talk to us about and some interesting topics, in particular when it comes to legal issues. So, Steve, how are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Sean. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So what's new? What are some of the things you wanted to bring up on this week's show?
There's been a lot of movement since the last month. Actually, last month when I was here, we talked about the PACT Act, which is the Camp Lejeune and the Burn Pits Toxic Act. What is that? You've heard a lot about it on TV, Sean. Probably everybody has on the radio. Everybody is talking about the Camp Lejeune water. Lejeune water.
I've seen those commercials and things like that.
Right, more than you can imagine, and there's a reason for that. And if I could just give a little background, we've talked about this before, but I'm sure people hear this Camp Lejeune. What does it mean? And for veterans, it's particularly important. And I know I've talked to a couple of veterans about this, and they were actually stationed at Camp Lejeune. And for more than 30 years, service members and their families who were stationed at that base in North Carolina basically drank unknowingly and bathed in water contaminated with hazardous chemicals. And this was in Jacksonville, North Carolina, obviously a giant base. In the 1980s, they finally tested the water supply, found all kinds of environmental toxins of unbelievable vinyl chloride, benzene, just a litany of horrible chemicals that people were drinking and bathing in. And researchers who looked at this decided that these toxins increased the risk of various cancers, certain congenital disabilities, Parkinson's disease. And actually, Sean, more than 1 million people lived at Camp Lejeune during the contamination period. So what happened is people started to file VA claims, and we're going to get into that moment. And the VA sort of bollocks those up, and I'll get into that in a moment because that came out just this week, how badly the VA bollocks up the people who were claiming toxicity and cancers caused by toxic water at Camp Lejeune. But it's been researched and determined that if you have bladder cancer, cardiac birth defects, because don't forget, families were in the fort as well, female infertility, kidney cancer, liver cancer, certain multiple myelomas, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, renal toxicity, breast cancer, goes on and on, esophageal cancer, leukemia, lung cancer, miscarriage, Parkinson's disease, sclerodoma, just a list of actually presumed causes or things caused by the water, toxic water, Camp Lejeune. Now, what if it's not on this list? For instance, I've talked to people who've had prostate cancer. I talked to a man who had sterility, even though female infertility is there, male sterility is not. That doesn't mean you can't pursue a lawsuit, which is done with the Federal Tort Claims Act form, and then a lawsuit within 2 years. What happens is you have to be able to prove through medical testimony that, for instance, the prostate cancer, the sterility for a male is caused by this toxic water. So just because you're not on the list of those list of things, it doesn't mean that you're certainly not entitled to receive benefits. And I highly suggest that anybody at Camp Lejeune who might have had these conditions look into this. Our office is doing these things, and we're pursuing a lot of these things. So that's Camp Lejeune.
On Camp Lejeune, Steve, like how hard is it to file a claim, and how's that process get started? Are veterans going to have to go through the same process of trying to prove something that they were there, or they were affected by it, or what's that process like?
The process is you're going to have to prove that you actually were stationed at Camp Lejeune. You're going to have to actually probably get a lawyer, because it's not like you can go to the VA and file for claims now, but it's not lawsuits that ask for pain and suffering and all of the other things that lawsuits give you. But the process is you file a tort claim. It's done just like any other federal case. And then if it's denied within 2 years, you have a right to file within the federal court from the denial. So just like every other case that we have, we have, for instance, malpractice at veterans facilities, at hospitals, veterans hospitals, same thing. You have to file tort claims with the Federal Tort Claims Act. It's a form. You have to state what your injuries are. You have to state the damages you want. And then if you are denied, then you have a certain number of time in which to file a case. Usually it's 180 days from the date of the denial. You have to file the tort claim within 2 years. That's how it is with all these cases.
So my fear would be is that if I don't get an attorney involved right now and I start doing stuff on my own, or if I go through the process, I just go to the VA and say, hey, I was there at Camp Lejeune, and I do have some of the things on that list. But then things get worse 10 years down the road. And then now I'm still functioning, I'm still okay today, but 10, 20 years later, I'm basically facing disability because I have something that's still debilitating, not just something that's, just an ailment. And then what is the recourse for those people who maybe don't do anything now, but wait a while and then say, okay, well, I don't need anything right now, but maybe if I get sick, hopefully I don't, but if something happens, maybe I'll look back to that incident and say, you know what, maybe I should have filed a claim, or maybe I should try to get disability.
Well, and you're exactly right. And the problem is, if it comes back 14 years and you do it wrong, or you don't file the lawsuit, you're out. Okay, you're out because there are certain time limits that apply to these lawsuits. If you don't file your lawsuits in time, the statute of limitations applies, and you are gone. No turning back on that, Sean. Wow. And I guess you could still go to the Department of Veterans Affairs, but just this week, Thursday, it was determined that the Department of Veterans Affairs mishandled nearly 40% of all disability claims filed for exposure to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. They denied or delayed benefits for 21,000 affected veterans. Out of the 57,500 claims filed since 2017 for that 30 years, they denied 17,200 prematurely instead of asking for additional information. And claims filed by another 2,300 veterans were assigned incorrect dates, denying them nearly $14 million in retroactive payments. So you could see that if you depend on the VA to do this instead of lawsuits with private lawyers, you're going to end up, perhaps, like all these other people, with a 40% error rate at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Kind of inexcusable that they literally, it's coming out just this week, literally mishandled these COVID these Lejeune claims. Actually mishandled them, and therefore the point you are making is, if you're going to pursue this, you ought to have a lawyer pursue it for you. And I'll give you some other examples if you want. We have the 3M hearing, the 3M lawsuit with the earplugs. This has been going on for a few years. We got involved in it early on. And so 3M was a big company, obviously. They purchased a unit called Aero Technologies. And Aero Technologies made millions and millions of dollars from the government by giving earplugs, by selling earplugs for combat. The one problem, they were useless.
Right.
And in fact, not only were they useless, there was a ketam. That's a whistleblower case that was brought. The Aero 3M paid $9 million to say, yeah, we cheated the federal government. That's what a ketam case is all about. So now it's litigation, full-blown litigation over people can't hear, or have tinnitus, ringing in their ears. And so what is 3M? Has a unit. Their unit is Aero Technologies. Just recently, Aero Technologies goes bankrupt. So they're trying to get out of their verdicts. One verdict has been $50 million because of punitive elements. They were taking people, making money with the military, providing useless product, and people lost their hearing. So this stuff goes on. But for lawyers who are involved filing these lawsuits and looking into these things, in my opinion, nothing happens with these folks. Now, there's going to be a long, just like we see with the Johnson & Johnson talc thing right now, that talc causes cancer. They took that unit bankrupt trying to get out of those claims. We're going to see a lot of this coming on. But what we see here is you need lawyers. You need lawyers to do these things. Now we have, we talk about burn pits, right? The burn pits we've been talking about over the last few months. And what happens with the burn pits are those large fields or pits where they literally burnt all that stuff, causing cancers and all kinds of things. Well, they passed legislation, and that you could go to the VA if you're a veteran who have burn pit issues, and make sure that you go ahead and file your claims for all kinds of things that could be caused by all of those toxins in the burn pit. Interestingly, over the last month, the PACT Act, including the Lejeune, including the burn pit legislation, was all set to go. And you might have heard this on news, Sean, where like 25 senators, Republican senators, reversed course, even though it had been a kind of an act or legislation that was bipartisan. All of a sudden they flipped because they wanted additional things added into the package.
As always.
Well, that caused a big uproar. It finally got passed. But this is recent, and you must jump on your rights now, in my opinion.
So, Steve, how do people get a hold of you if they need to get information, also to get help for this type of case or any case, particularly for veterans? People that, once again, going back to the idea that if you don't have professional help, I hate to see someone go through the process, not get everything that they need, get to a situation where 10, 15, 20 years down the road, they look back and say, I wish I could have done something.
Well, Arnold, you could reach me always 312-781-1977. And that's my office number, 312-781-1977. And we do all kinds of these VA claims or veterans claims, including at VA hospitals, these type of Lejeune cases and 3M cases as well. So we're doing a lot of these things. And I'll give you an example, if I can, of what you just mentioned. So when the COVID American Rescue Plan came out, the government put $400 million away for veteran retraining programs as part of the American Rescue Plan. And even though millions went into that aid, which is, by the way, going to revert back to the federal government, I'd like you to take a guess how many jobs for retraining were landed because of this $400 million that was available. How many do you think, Sean?
I couldn't tell you.
397 jobs.
Wow.
397 jobs. The offer to military veterans left employed by the pandemic was great, right? They said you could go online, and people still can, by the way. But then we had what happened. You had people, and we talked about this a few weeks ago with the jewelry place that took advantage of veterans. And then you had these colleges popped up, quote unquote, these online colleges. There was one Chicago-based, and they basically took money from the Department of Veterans Affairs and provided nothing. They had no teachers. They were unable to get the job done. And so as a result of that, even though only 6,800 veterans even enrolled in the program. And by the way, which is a shame because the $400 million is out there, right, to help get more jobs. But then they saw the cheaters come out. And then basically what happened is the for-profit schools. I was
going to get to that, the for-profit schools, because that was when all of those schools started getting a lot of heat.
That's right. And
because they were giving all these useless degrees. People trying to go in for nursing, people trying to go in for mechanics, all kinds of things that are real jobs that the country needs. And then they come out of all these $20,000 in debt, and then all of a sudden you have a worthless degree. But a lot of for veterans were targets because they wanted your VA money, they wanted your GI Bill.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, these schools, one of them which submitted false reports, misled veterans, They regained eligibility and then took money from the VA and said that they saw tremendous success. And in fact, they basically just took the money. And so when you have 367 people, remember, $400 million, 397 people land jobs because of
That's
the for-profit that you just talked about. I mean, where does this depravity end and this absolute greediness of these people? But there's still time, right? And so I suggest that if veterans who are listening to this show think that they could use this, they should go to this COVID aid package, look it up online, and start to apply to maybe legitimate schools. But at December, this disappears. It's like Cinderella, right? At 12 o'clock, it's over. Same thing here. You know, so, you know, and I'll tell you, one thing I've seen when working with veterans over the years has been really the people who've applied for benefits, and I've heard stories that really at first was sort of hard to believe, that, you know, and people call me and say, my God, Steve, this is what happened. And so there's actually a movie that came out just recently. It's called Breaking.
Oh, wow.
It just came out, and it actually is about a true story of a tragic true story of a Marine veteran struggle with the VA. And it just came out, and it's about Marine veteran Brian Brown Easley, who served in Kuwait and Iraq. And after his discharge, he got on by a disability check from the Department of VA, but his life fell apart after that check was garnished to pay off a debt. Guess who, Sean? A for-profit college.
Wow.
Okay? So this actually, there's the star of the movie is well known, and I think it just came out in the theaters, and I think this would be the actor's name is John Boyega. He's been in many different things. The name of the movie is Breaking. I'm going to watch it. I think that it's going to tell a story that probably so many of your listeners are experiencing tragically, that what people have to go through. So I think that these for-profit colleges taking advantage of VA, of the veterans' money, it's kind of sad.
It is. And then people don't realize that you can't, in the military, you cannot have debt. Any outstanding debt is so easy to get your wages garnished because the military will not tolerate you being in debt or being delinquent on debt. So they'll garnish your checks, and they can take your whole check to pay off some past due bill or past due debt. So you have gotten, just like this young man's story, gotten into debt because of a for-profit college. You didn't get a degree that was of any use to you, but now you have all this debt's going to will take you 10 years to get this money back, 20 years to get this money back. That is sad.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad. And then we see the private individuals, the jewelers who we talked about, taking advantage of the veterans and selling them bills of goods and active military. And it's a shame. One last thing, because I know I'm running out of time, is that many months ago, executive producer Glenda Smith did a great job. There's a lawsuit that was filed for discrimination with African Americans in the VA process. That is still pending, and I know at one point we're going to try to get some congressional support to help us kind of move that ball forward. And I think it would be important, because what we're finding out is that there's been an inordinate amount of denials for veterans benefits, disability benefits at the VA to those of color. And I think over the next course of months, we have to look into that and start that process again of really trying to help that get cooking again. And finally, leaving on a good note, years ago when I started with veterans, with the Heroes Group, there was the Ferris Act, which prevented active military from pursuing medical malpractice claims. This week on Thursday, the U.S. Department of Defense released a final rule allowing service members to make claims for medical malpractice at military facilities. So that's a wonderful thing. It is. It's and I know I have to leave you because we're out of time, but thank you.
This is our advisory board members, Attorney Steve Steidman, 312-781-1977. anything regarding Camp Lejeune or any legal questions you have, he's a good attorney, a person who's got a lot of experience and a lot of success dealing with these issues and has educated a lot of us on what can be done to help veterans. Protect yourself out there. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Sean. Have a great day.
You too.